Then we have their reinterpretation as being rational and practical. Then we have the idea of the languages in Dasam Granth being classical, which wouldn't make money. Then we have this idea, well, we need to be vocational. We need to make money, we need to make economy, and education should be geared around that rather than being classical. Then in the Dasam Granth we have this idea of symbiosis, where entities work together. But after the Singh Sabha movement we have this idea of competition. In the Dasam Granth we have this gender neutral theme of God. But then afterwards we have this idea of this masculine God. And not only that, a Singh himself is masculine. He's not neutral in his internal world, that he's hyper masculine, that we have this He-Man Singh being born. Then you have this humanistic idea, and then we have this nationalistic idea. Then in Punjab we have this idea of pluralism, again, which we can find in the Dasam Granth. Then we have the Singh Sabha idea of defining religion. Now, there are other points that are interconnected, which should be in the next. So, this scientism is a new belief that all things are pragmatic and practical. And what we have to ask ourselves is, a belief in God itself pragmatic or practical or scientific? Could it be? Surely there's a clash even in that analysis. And one of the main things that changed was the Panth, which was the Akalis, which was the timeless or deathless Panth, now became linear. They moved into history of time. A Panth which is Pargat, Pargatio Khalsa, Paramatam Ki Moj. Instead of the Khalsa becoming Pargat, the Khalsa was now defined as a historical event. So we have this idea of empiricism, of proof with evidence versus experience. Now again, how does that link into the Dasam Granth? Well, we all know that the Dasam Granth is a mythological text. It deals with mythology in many sections, in probably at least 2/3 of the Granth. So when we analyze mythology, what we have to ask ourselves a question: what is the worldview Guru Gobind Singh is trying to paint? What is the worldview? If Guru Gobind Singh was the writer of the Granth, what is being painted here? So first of all, we have this Abrahamic idea of religion. Imagine a religion with one God expressed through a prophet, obeying this religion to find joy in heaven, and the alternative is hell. So this is quite a brief definition of some of the Abrahamic religions, and I wouldn't say it's definitive, but it somewhat gives the message across. Now you imagine other ancient religions that believe in God as well as demigods and goddesses, several lives, and that each path can get to God. There's no concept of evil, as all is the will of God. The cosmos is multi-dimensional and populated by a variety of beings, and time is cyclic, e.g. in jugs. Now the other definition before nicely fits into this definition as well, because the prophets would be a variety of beings, God would fit in there, the heaven and hell would be 2 dimensions in the multi-dimensional nature. So it fits into this, but this does not fit into that definition, because the first definition is constricted while this definition is open-minded. Now again, what relationship does this have to Sikhism or Sikhism today? Well, when we study myth gives rise to symbology, and symbology gives rise to rituals. Now we can say Sikhism is devoid of rituals, but what we have to look at is in each Gurdwara we put what scientists would conceive that we put a book to sleep. In our view, as a Sikh, we'd say we put Sri Guru Granth Sahib Maharaj to bed, to sleep in Sukhasan. We do the seva of that. Or Maharaj inspires us to do seva. But in the rational mind, they'll say these Sikhs are idol worshippers, and they put their book to bed. They have a ritual associated with opening and closing their book. And we would get very offended that our Guru is being called a book. So, whether we like it or not, in the Panth, we are very ritualistic. from the rituals of creating Kara Prasad, to the rituals of Amrit Sanchar, to a Khand Path. It goes on and on and on, how many rituals we actually do. But we no longer interpret them as rituals because we associate rituals with Hinduism and other religions, but we don't see the rituals in our own dharma, and we don't like to see it as ritualism. But what I'm putting forward here is that potentially, maybe these rituals are interconnected with myth and symbology that is in the Dasam Granth and in Guru Granth Sahib. Furthermore to this, in Punjabi culture itself, is there a link between the writing of Guru Gobind Singh to the way Punjabi culture is? Now we know in Punjabi music there's this whole talk of Anak and Badala and so on and so forth. We find some of these ideas again in the mythology of Dasam Granth. When we refer back to old folk sayings, and particularly the language of Chandi Diwar, we find references to Ukliyan Nasa, and most people who are familiar with folklore and Punjabi folk language will know that words like Minj, Had, Gitte, Mu, Ak, and about how Teri Ak Kadadani and so on and so forth, that language is spoken. Again, we find that kind of language in the Dasam Granth, hence why so many scholars are offended by that language. If the scripture is considered to be a religious text, it probably would offend people. But if we have a concept of Miri Piri, then if we are looking at the concept of military and war, then how could it be offensive if we look at it through this objective lens? And then also, when we go into the dance music of Punjab, Bhangra, and we look at the beats within the Dasam Granth, we find that in this movement there's a hidden martial art. We find in this movement there is a tariqa of how we do a var against somebody, or how we can defend an attack. So the language and rhythm of the Dasam Granth is quite unique and is completely different in many respects to Ard Granth in its outlook. To end the presentation, this is an illustrated folio of Dasam Granth, and we can see Guru Gobind Singh just on his horse on the top right hand side, and there's a symbolic representation of Chandi above Ek Onkar. And many people would find this particular artwork, you could say, offensive. But what we have to do is we have to step back into the mindset of the people at that time who had just come out of what was largely the Hindu culture. And this was something they could relate to. Like today, we watch television and programs, and we have many things we can relate to, and there's a new mythology and new programs and new films. But in those days when there was no media, this was their television, this was the epics that were going on. And if we look at it in that context, it is not so offensive. And furthermore, when we look at more controversial compositions like the Chalitro Pakyan, which many people are against, saying how could Guru Gobind Singh write this? Well, if the Guru is the Guru, could it not be the fact that the things that were going on in the world now and going on in the world then, that he narrated those? Now when we watch films, we never think should we be watching it, but when we look through the secular eye, that this is religious, how can it have worldly things in religious material? Well, we are a religion of Miri Piri. We are a religion or a way of life of two sides. Now there might be those scholars who believe no, the Guru couldn't have written this, and the Chaupai Sahib, another Nityanem Baniya, because Chaupai Sahib itself is from Chalitro Pakyan,